Welcome to Westward Hearts. This is Healing the Widower's Heart by Darlene Carson. Chapter 2. It was a beautifully warm and bright day, with only a pair of fluffy white clouds hanging in the sky and a light breeze washing over the land. It would have been perfect weather for lounging beside the creek enjoying a picnic, or perhaps for going for a stroll and hunting wild asparagus along the roadside. On the other hand, it was actually a bit too warm to be comfortable for a 3-mile walk out to Nelson Deere's farm, but that was what Johanna was doing nonetheless. She wiped the perspiration from her brow again, and, not for the first time, thanked God that she had remembered the parasol. I'd have been quite well done by the time I arrived, if not for that, she thought. As she looked out across the fields, she could finally just see the roof line of a house up over the next rise. She was passing between the Wilson farm and the Marks ranch, which meant that the place ahead was Nelson's. Just thinking about the fact that she was so close to his house, that, if everything went to plan, she would see him shortly, was enough to make her stomach clench up from nervousness. He would want to know, of course, why his ad hadn't appeared in the paper. Johanna wasn't certain that he had even seen the bee yet, but she had never known a client not to go looking for the ads they paid for, so she assumed that Nelson would do the same. She had stayed up half the night thinking about how to explain things, and in the end she had come up with a plan that she was sure would work. The answer, she had planned to tell him, was that there was a problem with the assembly of the newspaper. Not all of the classified ads had made it into the edition that he saw. They had instead sent out a supplement with the advertisements, but not everybody received that, apparently. If he mentioned that he had seen the following day's paper as well and still failed to find his ad, she would explain how the type pieces had gone missing that afternoon, preventing her father from laying out the text of several items, including his ad. In fact, if Nelson had seen the bee for each of the 4 days since his visit to the office, Johanna had come up with a response to explain why his ad hadn't run. This morning, however, she had decided to scrap all her stories and just tell him the truth. While she walked along the wheel ruts that led from the trail up to Nelson's house, she could feel her heart pounding in her chest. She tried to distract herself from her nerves by studying his home. It was a sod house, but nicely done, with glass windows and a wooden door. Some soddies were built with turf sloppily piled row upon row, giving the look of a wall perennially about to fall down on itself. But Nelson's house had been built with sod bricks cut precisely and laid with care. It was larger than many of the farmhouses in Lancaster County, which struck her as odd. So much room for one man, she thought, and then felt a sinking feeling within. Except that he must have built it when he had a wife, and maybe his baby on the way. She glanced up at the sod roof, where the spring grass was already thick and green. A few clumps of pink phlox bloomed there as well, and she couldn't help but wonder if it had been Nelson's wife who had planted it. She took a quick glance out across the fields as she neared the door. It had been a warm spring, and thus the corn had been planted early. She could see rows of tender plants running across the land like threads of green, woven into a rich brown blanket. She was hoping that since the planting was finished, Nelson would be at home instead of out in the fields. But there's only one way to find out, she thought as she knocked and waited. In only a moment, the door opened and she felt a rush of excitement as she laid eyes on Nelson again. He obviously hadn't been expecting company, as he was unshaven. His suspenders were hanging loose from his waistband, and he held a tin cup of coffee in one hand. He blinked a couple of times and his brow furrowed as if he weren't sure who he was looking at. "Miss Hines, what are you doing here?" "Good morning, Mr. Deere," she said, trying to erase the nerves from her voice. I was just in the area, and I thought I'd stop by to talk about your ad." If he had looked slightly confused to see her in the first place, that expression only deepened now. He stepped outside and looked around. "Did you walk all the way out here from town?" "Yes, I did," she said. "It's such a lovely day for a stroll, I thought I'd take advantage of it." At that moment, a drop of sweat leaped from her hairline and rolled down her forehead, across the bridge of her nose. She swiped it away, though not before he followed it with his eyes. "Would you like something to drink?" he asked. "I just made some water," she said. "Water would be excellent, if you don't mind." "Sure thing. Come on inside," he said. "We'll get out of the sun and have a chat. I'm just going to run and fill the water pail." While he went out to the pump, Johanna took a seat at the small kitchen table and looked around. She had expected that the interior of the house would be one large room like most Saudis. But in fact, it was divided into at least 4 that she could see. The kitchen, what looked like a sitting room just down the hall, and what she guessed were 2 bedrooms. The care that Nelson had put into the exterior of the Saudi showed on the inside as well. The house had a plank floor and plaster walls, so that it was much brighter and cleaner than she'd been expecting. It looked quite cozy, in fact. All he needs is a family to turn it from a house back into a home, she thought. After a minute, Nelson returned with a pail of water, and he used a ladle to fill a tall glass for her. The water was cold and sweet, and she had to restrain herself from downing all of it in just one gulp. After the walk out to the farm, she almost would have traded the glass for the pail itself. "So, what is it that you wanted to talk about? Is there a problem with my ad?" He poured himself another splash of coffee and took a seat across from her. "In a way," she said. "I mean, the problem isn't with your ad. Quite the opposite. I think it's very effective, and I'm sure that it would attract a number of replies." "Would attract," he said. "You mean it's not doing that yet?" "No, it's not." His eyes narrowed. "Why not?" "Well, it hasn't actually appeared yet." "What? You mean nobody's even seen it?" "No, people have seen it," she said. "Of course people have seen it. You saw it. I saw it." He set down his cup and raised his eyebrows. "You're saying that you didn't publish my ad?" Johanna sighed as she drummed her fingers on the table. "That's what I'm saying." She found it impossible to look him in the eye. But after a minute of silence, she found it impossible not to. "After we talked the other day, it just seemed to me that you don't need that ad." He snorted. "How else do you suggest I find a woman?" "Let me put that another way," she said. "You don't need that ad anymore. It worked already." His eyes clouded and he cocked his head to the side. "How is that possible? You're the only woman who's seen it." Johanna took a deep breath, swallowed hard, and put on her brightest, most optimistic smile. "And I think I'm the woman for you," she said. Nelson rubbed his jaw as he considered what Johanna had said. He never imagined that an ad for a wife would get him a reply so fast, especially without it appearing in print. "Are you serious? We hardly know each other," he said. "Well, that's kind of how these ads work," Johanna said. "You usually don't get replies from people you already know." His face reddened. "No, I know. I just mean... I don't know what I mean," he finally allowed. "I'm just surprised, I guess." "Are you really serious?" "I am," she said. "Think of it like this. Instead of having to wait for an answer, you already got one. If you want, I can even still run it in the paper for you. But I'm hoping that won't be necessary." He reached for his cup and took a long sip of coffee, just to give himself a moment to think. The surprise at her reason for calling was one thing. But aside from that, he was happy to see Johanna again, even if he hadn't been thrilled about setting up his ad with her in the first place. Just having to place an ad for a woman was embarrassing enough without having to explain it to a beautiful girl, and she was definitely beautiful. She was the kind of young woman that really fired up his imagination. A lot of girls he saw when he went into town were too skinny for his taste, either from too much work or too little food. Johanna, however, still had a bit of baby fat on her, which was very endearing. The walk to the farm had given her a touch of pink in the cheeks, nicely complementing her light blonde hair, and as he looked into her eyes, he suddenly felt his pulse begin to race. In the newspaper office, the light had been poor, and he'd been distracted anyway by the whole process. He hadn't been examining Johanna closely. Now, though, here in his light-filled kitchen, he saw that her eyes were hazel. Just like Virginia. It felt like all the air had seeped out of the room, and he had to fight to take a full breath. Nelson tore his eyes away from hers. It was the only way to regain control of his thoughts. "Johanna, I really don't know what to say," he said. "When I placed that advertisement, I wasn't expecting, well, you. Maybe not, but when you described what you wanted in a wife, you were describing me," she said. "I'm cheerful, I'm educated, and my father will tell you that I don't mind offering my opinion about everything, even when it's not asked for." "I'm sure that's all true," he said, "but I'm only 23, young and healthy, just the right age to get married, in fact." "Yes, you are, but there's no rush, of course. We can take as long as you want. The only thing I can see stopping us is if you don't think I'm pretty enough," she said. Her gaze fell from his for a moment, but quickly recovered. "Am I not pretty?" He paused to consider her and found himself fighting for breath again. "You are very, very pretty," he finally said. But what?" It was a good question she had. I was looking for a particular kind of woman, he thought, and she literally showed up on my doorstep. Isn't she exactly what I was looking for in a girl, and beautiful to boot? There was no argument left to make. Johanna had preempted everything perfectly. The simple truth was that she was, in fact, a better match than he expected. "But nothing," he said. "You're right. Let's try." Her eyes went wide. "Honest?" "Miss Hines, would you mind terribly much if I began to call on you?" She practically leaped out of the chair. "I just knew this was going to work out." Her smile had been bright before, but now it was positively sun-like. "You won't regret this, I promise you. I'm so excited." "I am too," he said, and he matched her grin. Truth be told, it did feel good. Scary, but good. "My parents are going to be shocked and happy. They were thinking I'd never get married," she said. "Really? Is there something I should be worried about?" She slapped his shoulder lightly. "Not for anything bad," she said, "because I'm too choosy. Anyway, I'm going to go tell them." "Not walking, you're not," he said. "I'll get the runabout hitched up and take you into town." He opened the door and was about to follow her outside when he turned and spotted the tintype photograph that was hanging in the hall. "Forgive me, Virginia," he thought, then stepped out into the sunshine.